"Please, just for one night," she whispered, eyes glistening under the office lights. "Pretend to be my husband." The city shimmered under a veil of early snow, soft flakes gliding through the December air like whispers of forgotten dreams. Christmas lights blinked along the glass towers of Manhattan, reflections dancing on wet streets where hurried strangers carried shopping bags and steaming cups of coffee. The world looked warm, festive, alive. But inside the 32nd floor office of Blackwood Enterprises, warmth was something that rarely existed. The floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a skyline dusted with snow, the kind of view most would pause to admire. Yet Adrian Blackwood didn't even glance up. He sat behind his immaculate desk, pen in hand, eyes locked on the glowing laptop screen. His expression was cold, carved from the same glass and steel that surrounded him. "Sophie," he said without looking up. His voice was smooth, low, even, but it carried that sharp, effortless authority that made people sit up straighter. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood." Sophie Lane's voice was soft, careful. She stood just beyond his desk, clutching a stack of neatly printed reports. Her dark hair was tied into a loose bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face. She looked tired, too tired for 28, but her eyes still held that stubborn flicker of warmth that refused to die, even after long days and cold nights. He extended a hand without looking at her, and she quickly placed the reports down. "These numbers are wrong," he murmured, scanning a page. "Cross-check with accounting before the end of the day." She nodded, her hands tightening around her clipboard. "Yes, sir. I'll handle it right away." There was a pause, just long enough for her to hear the faint sound of Christmas music drifting from the lobby downstairs. Then Adrian's sharp voice broke through again. "And Sophie?" She froze halfway to the door. "Yes." He finally looked up. His blue-gray eyes were piercing, unreadable. "Take the afternoon off." She blinked in surprise. "Sir?" He leaned back in his chair. "It's Christmas Eve. You've been here every day this week. Go home." The words were kind, in theory, but his tone wasn't. It was distant, mechanical, as though he were commenting on the weather. Sophie hesitated. "Are you sure? There's still the product proposal." "I said go home, Sophie." There it was again, that quiet steel in his voice. She nodded, gathering her things quickly. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. Merry Christmas." He didn't respond. He just returned to his screen, as if the phrase meant nothing at all. Sophie walked out of his office with her coat half-zipped, a small sigh escaping her lips. She wasn't sure whether to feel grateful or empty. By the time she stepped outside, snow was falling thicker now, swirling under the golden glow of the street lamps. Sophie pulled her scarf tighter and checked her phone. Missed messages. She winced. Her mother. She opened the latest one. "Mom, can't wait to finally meet your husband, dear. Make sure he likes roast turkey. I'm so proud of you." Her breath caught in her throat. Her husband. Her imaginary husband. It had started weeks ago. One innocent lie told out of desperation and pride. Her mother, Eleanor Lane, had always been proud, always comparing Sophie to her older sister, a successful lawyer with a picture-perfect family. Sophie, on the other hand, was the struggling one, the assistant who never quite made it, who worked for a man who barely knew she existed. So when her mother called last month, voice dripping with disappointment, and asked if she'd be coming alone again for Christmas, Sophie panicked. The words had tumbled out before she could stop them. "No, Mom. I'm married now." The silence that followed was deafening. Then came the delighted squeal. And now Sophie was stuck. She kicked at a patch of snow and exhaled shakily. "Brilliant, Sophie," she muttered. "Absolutely brilliant." She'd hoped to find a way out of it. Maybe fake an illness or say her husband was abroad. But her mother had insisted, "No excuses. Bring him. I want to meet this mystery man of yours." And the worst part, her brother Lucas was home from college, and her family was already bragging to the neighbors. The lie had grown legs, and a heartbeat. Sophie returned to her small apartment that night, the one-bedroom space dimly lit with fairy lights she'd strung up weeks ago to feel less alone. She sat on her couch, laptop open, trying to figure out how to undo the mess. But every possible solution ended with humiliation. That's when her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She frowned and answered. "Hello? Miss Lane," a deep voice said. She froze. "Mr. Blackwood?" There was a brief pause. "You left your laptop charger in the conference room. I was calling to let you know." "Oh," she said, her voice small. "Thank you. I'll pick it up after Christmas." He didn't hang up immediately. There was silence, a strange one, the sound of wind through the receiver. Then finally, "You sound upset." She laughed softly, though it came out brittle. "I'm fine, sir, just family stuff." Family. He said the word as though it were foreign. "You're traveling for Christmas?" "Yes, tomorrow morning." She hesitated, then blurted out before she could stop herself. "With my husband." Why did she say that? He didn't even ask. Adrian's silence deepened. "Your husband?" "Uh-huh," she stammered, gripping her phone. He's wonderful. My family's dying to meet him." She wanted to sink into the floor. What was she doing? Lying again? To him? Adrian said nothing. She thought maybe the call had dropped. Then, quietly, he asked, "Does he treat you well?" The question caught her off guard. She swallowed. "Yes," she whispered, "he's good to me." Another silence. Then his voice came, softer than she'd ever heard it. "Good." And the line went dead. The next morning, Sophie's world tilted. She was rushing through Grand Central, suitcase in hand, when a familiar voice called out from behind her. "Miss Lane." She turned and nearly dropped her bag. Adrian Blackwood stood there in a charcoal overcoat, scarf around his neck, looking as out of place among the commuters as a king in a marketplace. His eyes were on her, unreadable as always. "Mr. Blackwood?" she stammered. "What are you doing here?" He walked toward her, each step deliberate. "You're heading to Connecticut, correct?" She blinked, stunned. "How did you—" "I asked HR," he said simply, as if that explained everything. Then, almost offhandedly, he added, "I'm coming with you." Her mouth fell open. "What?" He tilted his head slightly. "You said your family's expecting your husband. I assume you don't have one." She turned red instantly. "You heard that?" "I did." His expression softened just a fraction. "And you sounded desperate." Her cheeks burned. "Mr. Blackwood, you can't be serious. You can't just—" "I can," he interrupted smoothly. "And I will. You've worked for me for 3 years, Miss Lane. You've covered my mistakes, defended me to the board, and handled things no one else could. Consider this. Repayment." She just stared at him, speechless. He adjusted his coat. "Besides," he added dryly, "I have no plans for Christmas." And before she could form a single word of protest, he was already walking toward the platform. The train ride to Connecticut was a blur. Sophie sat across from him, hands fidgeting in her lap. Adrian, on the other hand, was the picture of calm, reading a business report as though he weren't about to impersonate someone's husband. She finally spoke, voice trembling. "You don't have to do this." He didn't look up. "I know." "Then why are you?" A beat of silence. Then his eyes lifted to hers, soft, haunted. "Because I remember what it's like to have no one." Her breath caught. She didn't know what to say after that. Outside, the snow fell heavier. Inside, the air between them warmed just a little. And as the train rolled through the winter countryside toward her hometown, Sophie couldn't help but wonder if this impossible, absurd Christmas miracle was the beginning of something she never dared hope for, something real. The small Connecticut town looked like something out of a snow globe. Icicles hung from the roofs of brick houses, wreaths adorned every door, and faint Christmas music drifted from open windows. The air smelled of pine, cinnamon, and distant wood smoke, warm and alive, so unlike the sterile world Adrian was used to. As the taxi turned onto Maplewood Lane, Sophie's heart began to race. Her family's house came into view. A cozy, worn home with a sagging porch and lights that blinked unevenly. The same place she'd grown up dreaming of escape, now the place where her biggest lie waited to be revealed. "Mr. Blackwood," she began nervously. "Adrian," he corrected, eyes still on the passing snow. She hesitated. "Adrian," she repeated softly. "You don't have to." He turned to her, expression unreadable but calm. "I gave my word, Sophie. I'm your husband. For tonight." Something in his tone, quiet, steady, unexpectedly gentle, sent a strange ache through her chest. The car stopped. Before she could open the door, he stepped out first, circling around to offer his hand. Sophie hesitated before taking it. His hand was warm, steadying, and for a second she forgot to breathe. The door swung open before they even knocked. "Sophie!" Her mother's voice filled the cold air, bright and unrestrained. Eleanor Lane stood in the doorway, wrapped in a red cardigan and smelling faintly of flour and peppermint. "Oh my goodness, there you are." Sophie barely had time to react before she was pulled into a tight hug. "You look thin. You never eat properly," Eleanor scolded affectionately, cupping her daughter's face. Then, as if remembering, her gaze flicked past Sophie and landed on Adrian. The world seemed to still. "Mom," Sophie said quickly, trying to sound casual. "This is Adrian, my husband." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Eleanor's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, my heavens, your husband." She rushed forward, beaming. "He's even more handsome than I imagined." Adrian blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Thank you, ma'am," he said politely, extending a hand. Eleanor ignored it entirely and pulled him into a hug. "We're so happy to meet you, dear." Come in. Dinner's almost ready." Sophie wanted to sink through the floor. As they stepped inside, warmth enveloped them. The scent of roasted turkey, pine needles and cinnamon cookies filling the air. Her brother Lucas appeared from the kitchen, tall and gangly, with a grin spreading across his face. "Whoa, sis, you didn't tell us your husband was a model." "Lucas!" Sophie hissed, mortified. Adrian chuckled softly, a rare sound that made everyone pause. "I assure you, I'm very far from that." Eleanor fluttered around, fussing over coats, offering cider, and chatting non-stop. Sophie tried to keep up, praying her lie wouldn't crumble under the weight of her mother's curiosity. But Adrian played the role effortlessly. He listened attentively when Eleanor talked about her homemade decorations. He complimented the old house with genuine warmth. When Lucas cracked a joke about Sophie's cooking disasters, Adrian smiled and said, "I can confirm she's improved. Slightly." Sophie shot him a glare across the table, but there was laughter in her eyes. Somehow, impossibly, this felt real. Dinner was chaos. Warm, messy, loud. Eleanor told embarrassing childhood stories. Lucas teased Sophie mercilessly, and through it all, Adrian sat beside her, quiet but present. Every now and then, his hand brushed hers under the table. Whether by accident or not, she couldn't tell. But each time, her heart skipped the same way. When the plates were cleared and the family moved to the living room for dessert, Sophie found herself stealing glances at him. He didn't look like the same man she worked for. The cold, unreachable CEO who dismissed warmth like weakness. Here, surrounded by twinkling lights and laughter, he seemed human. The hard edges of his face softened, his voice lower, gentler. Her mother caught her staring. "He's wonderful, Sophie," she whispered, smiling. "You did well." Sophie looked down quickly, guilt pressing heavy against her chest. Wonderful, yes, but he wasn't hers. And when this night ended, he'd go back to his world, and she'd go back to hers. Later that night, after Lucas went upstairs and Eleanor retreated to her room, Sophie and Adrian stood by the small Christmas tree in the living room. The lights glowed softly, reflecting in the glass ornaments like tiny stars. Thank you, she said quietly, for doing this, for saving me. Adrian turned toward her. His eyes, cool gray, had softened into something warmer. You don't owe me thanks, Sophie. You just didn't want to disappoint your family. There's no shame in that. She smiled sadly. Still, I lied. And dragged you into it. He shrugged lightly, gaze flicking to the twinkling lights. It's Christmas. People do strange things for the ones they care about. Something in his tone made her heart catch. You sound like you speak from experience. He was silent for a moment. Then, very softly, he said, I used to, before the accident. She turned to him, frowning slightly. Your fiancé? He nodded. Emma, we were together 5 years. The paparazzi chased us after a charity event. The car skidded on ice. His voice broke slightly, though his expression remained calm. Since then, I stopped celebrating Christmas. It just hurt too much. The weight of his confession hung in the air. Sophie stepped closer, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, Adrian. He looked at her. Really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. Don't be. You brought me here. You made me remember what it feels like to belong. The quiet between them deepened, filled with unspoken words. Outside, snow drifted lazily past the window. Sophie's breath caught. Adrian. He took a slow step toward her. Sophie. Their names sounded different now. Softer. Fragile. And then, without thinking, he reached up and brushed a snowflake from her hair that had melted into a drop of water. His fingers lingered for a second too long. Her heart stuttered in her chest. She didn't know who leaned in first, but when his lips touched hers it was like the world stopped. No boardrooms, no lies, no loneliness, just the faint sound of the fire crackling and the taste of warmth after years of cold. When they finally pulled apart, neither spoke. They didn't need to, because in that single, fleeting kiss, something impossible had quietly become real. Morning came wrapped in soft light and the smell of cinnamon pancakes. Eleanor was humming in the kitchen, Lucas was laughing over coffee, and Sophie felt like she'd woken from a dream she didn't want to end. Adrian stood by the window, already dressed in his coat. He turned as she approached. I should head back, he said quietly. Her chest tightened. Already? He smiled faintly. Your family deserves time with you. And besides, his gaze softened. The husband act was only for Christmas, remember? She forced a small smile, though her throat ached. Right. He took her hand briefly, gently. But Sophie, if you ever need more than an act, if you ever want something real. He hesitated, searching her eyes. You know where to find me. And just like that, he was gone, a dark figure fading into the snow outside. Sophie stood there, heart trembling, unsure whether to cry or smile. Her mother came up behind her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You love him, she said softly. Sophie turned, startled. What? No, Eleanor just smiled knowingly. Sweetheart, I wasn't born yesterday. I saw the way he looked at you. That wasn't pretending. Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to explain, but no words came, because deep down she knew her mother was right. It hadn't been pretend. Not anymore. That night, back in her small apartment, Sophie opened her phone and saw a new message waiting. Adrian, did your family enjoy dinner? She smiled through the tears that threatened to fall. Sophie, they loved it. Thank you for saving Christmas. A moment later, his reply came. Adrian, you saved mine. She stared at the screen, heart aching and full all at once. Outside, snow was falling again, soft, endless, and silent, like the world was being washed clean for a new beginning. And somewhere, in that quiet, Sophie realized something she'd never dared believe before. Sometimes, the love you pretend to have becomes the one you were always meant to find.